Landon on his troubled childhood. From what I've read, it's a very different childhood than your kids are having.
Yes, it was. I lived in a little town in back east.
New Jersey.
In New Jersey, right. A little town called Collingswood. I spent a few years before that in other towns, but they didn't mean much to me. By the time I moved to Collingswood, I was 4 years old. And I went through all of my school days there up until college. And I was the only Jewish boy in the school. And to a certain extent, it wasn't easy at that particular time.
Happy kid, unhappy kid?
Wanting to belong. I was a very, very good student in the early days. Before I realized that some kids were popular and some kids weren't. But then I wanted to become popular.
Were you?
I became popular only in that I got into more trouble than anybody else. So at least people noticed me. I would try for records and failures. I had as many as, out of 36 grades in a year, I had as many as 30 Fs.
Why? Why such a terrible student? You're not stupid.
I didn't care about anything. See, I didn't think I was going anywhere. We didn't have enough money to send me to a university. And in the 10th grade, near the very end of that year, I realized that I found something I could do well. I could throw the javelin. And which may seem like nothing, but everybody in this world needs something that they feel they do well. So no matter what it is, even with my kids, whatever it may be, I want to encourage that. But with me, it was I could throw something a long way. And I started throwing it more and more and more. I took an old beat-up javelin from the school. They let me have it. And I threw it all summer long while I was working. And eventually, I ended up in a position where I knew I could go to college. I could get a scholarship. So I skipped the grade that I had missed. And I never worked hard enough at that point to really pull my grades up very high. But it was enough that I could get into a junior college and then accept a scholarship.
And then when you got to college, there's the strangest story. You're smiling because you know what I...
Oh, sure.
You tell the story.
Well, I had a thing all through my high school years that I was Samson, because I was very, very tiny in school, really small. And when I graduated from high school, I only weighed 125. And at 125 pounds, I had the furthest throw in the United States in high school. And the other guys were all 6'5", 220. Matter of fact, when I went to SC and the coach saw me for the first time, they would take the names out of Scholastic magazine, and they would list the #1 man in the nation and each #1 boy in each event. So they took me sight unseen because my throws were much further than anybody else's. And he couldn't believe my name was Horowitz, Eugene Horowitz, right? And when I walked into his office, he said, "Are you Horowitz?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you're not exactly what we expected." So I had to go out and audition. I had to go out and throw it so they could see that I was the one. So, anyway, I had very long hair, and I thought that the longer my hair got every year, the further I could throw. And every year it worked out that way. And my first year at USC, I was the only one with long hair in those days. Everybody had a crew cut. And the guys held me down and shaved my head. And I went out that afternoon, I couldn't throw it. I was like 50 feet short of where I was throwing. And I threw for hours and hours and hours. I was really emotionally upset by the whole thing. And I ended up tearing all the tendons out of my elbow and developed a very bad infection from getting cortisone shots. They kept giving me shots and pain shots so I could keep throwing. And I finally went to another doctor, and he said, "If you keep doing this, you're not going to be able to write your name." So then I quit. I quit school.
So they cut your hair and you couldn't throw the javelin?
Yep. The mind is really an interesting thing, isn't it? It's amazing what you can do, or can't do.
You said that your mother and father didn't get along very well.
No.
And that you tried to keep them together. And that looking back, you're not sure you should have tried.
Yeah, you don't think about that when you're little. You just want your mom and dad to be together, whether they really should be or not. And so I would always be the one who would be begging and crying that things would be all right. And when I was little, and so they ended up staying together. I'm not sure if I was the sole reason why that happened, but I know I must have contributed to it. They just shouldn't have. They were two different people. My parents wouldn't speak to each other for long periods of time. That's very painful. Relaying messages, you know, when two people are sitting 5 feet away, tell your father supper's ready. That kind of stuff. 6 weeks sometimes without speaking. See, I never thought anybody loved anybody. My mother and father never loved each other. Really. Never. My first wife and I never loved each other. And we both knew it when we got married. I had married my first wife solely because I fell in love with her boy.
She had a child.
She had a child. And I loved Mark. He was a marvelous kid, and he reminded me kind of myself when I was a child. The day I was supposed to get married, I went in the house and I told her, I said, I'm not going to go through with it. I'm not going to get married. And she said, fine, all right. She said, Mark's in the backyard. So I was 19 years old. I went out in the backyard to talk to Mark. He was 7. And there was no way I could tell him. So I got married. And for a while I thought that was okay. Because does anybody really love anybody anyway? Well, the fact of the matter is they do. And that's what changed my life.
How did you learn about sex?
Oh, I learned about, all the things that the boys talk to each other about. And, I never had a conversation with my father about it. He was once going to discuss it with me when I was, actually right before I flew to California to go to college. And he was so embarrassed about saying anything about it that I just told him I know everything about it, not to worry about it.
Did you?
I had never had any sex relations with anyone. I didn't until after I had left college, after I quit school.
That's late, usually considered.
Well, I didn't know there was a race on. It may be late now. I don't think it was late then. I think most of the guys were lying to me at that time.
How did you get from Eugene Orowitz to Michael Landon?
Well, I went down to register with Screen Actors Guild after I got my first part. First you have to get a part, and then you can get in the guild. And the name I had picked was Michael Lane. And that particular year, they had made a movie. They were just going to start a movie called The Harder They Fall. And there was a guy 6'7" in that movie named Mike Lane. So that name was taken. So I just flipped the phone book open and found Landon.
Could have been anything. Who knows? You could have found Clark Gable if you'd looked.
Yeah, I hit a page. It worked out.
When you started making money, was there anything that you went out and bought, that really mattered? So many men, it seems to me, buy cars when they begin to make it.
I bought a car, a more expensive car than I'd ever had before, but I've had that car for 11 years. I'm not very good with those things. See, I lose things. I'm not good with money. I don't handle my money. I lose it. I never have a dime. When I go to work, if I have to make a phone call and there's a booth, I have to ask somebody for 10 cents because I never think to have any money.
Has money created any burdens for you?
No, everything's, the house is bigger than it would be. The cars are probably more expensive than they would be, but they all break down, I guarantee you.
By your definition, are you a success?
I think so. I think I am. But see, I don't think of a success in terms of my business. What I do for a living is not what makes me happy. I can't say it doesn't make me happy on certain days, but it is not my prime source of happiness. My prime source of happiness is my personal life, my family.
What are you most proud of?
I'm my children. I'm most proud of my kids. I really have good kids. Good, loving kids.
When you're an old man, what do you want to be able to say about the way you lived?
I think I just like people to think of me as that I was fair, and I like to be liked. I like people to like me, and I like people.
You're very easy to like. You're a nice man.
Thank you.
have changed.
Lifetime television for women.
In Little House on the Prairie, Michael got to act out the sort of family life he might have wished he'd had as a child. The sort of family life he seems to have found in 1983 with his third wife, Cindy, and their two young children. He was diagnosed with cancer in the spring of 1991 and died that summer. Michael Landon was a pioneer on screen and off. Anyone who hopes to reach the hearts and minds of children through the medium of television owes a debt of gratitude to Michael Landon for mounting that covered wagon and blazing the way.